Hello, man. Drew here, and this season of Servant has been a little bit bad for my marriage. My wife identifies very, very strongly with Dorothy. She finds herself thinking, I would do exactly the same thing if I was up against the wall the way that she was. This episode when Dorothy was going to take Jericho and run away with the money and just go off on her own, my wife was like, yes, that's what I would do. And then me, on the other hand, making my wife want to smother me with a pillow. Kind of like the Turners, where I'm in a bad relationship with a character that I know I shouldn't be anymore, but it's so symbiotic that I can't kind of break away from my affection for Leanne, even though she's proven time and time again that she's a loose cannon and that she's bad for the Turners. But I can't bring myself to completely turn away from her. And I probably should, and the Turners probably should as well. So this was a nice little ending to the season. It was a short episode, 26 minutes. And from a plot perspective, it didn't really explore a lot of things that we haven't already seen. But it was really, really well handled. The directing by Ishana Night Shyamalan, really, really good, as was her previous directorial efforts this season and in previous seasons. I've really enjoyed the style that she brings, and I think that she could have a very, very valid, very, very good career ahead of her, as long as she doesn't let her dad write any scripts for any movies that she directs. But I really, really enjoyed this episode. There were a number of really stunning and emotional scenes. The tension just built over this episode. And it really, when you watch it with the previous two episodes, I went back and rewatched this season with my wife before we watched the finale tonight. And watching this one back to back with the previous two episodes, it really does bring to culmination a lot of the things that have been building up this season, and it really ramps up the tension to do that. I recommend that you rewatch the season if you're even sort of thinking about doing it. It's a lot of fun. I didn't necessarily think I would enjoy rewatching this season nearly as much as I did, but I think that's a sign that it's a pretty good show. It's a rare thing these days where I just soak in the details and all the atmosphere of a show the way I do with Servant. This episode, I thought, one of the highlights, of course, besides the cliffhanger, which is all anyone's going to be talking about probably, but the meal, the last supper of the group before Leanne betrays Dorothy. It was a great moment because you knew that this is what Leanne wants. She wants to have them as a family. She wants all bygones to be bygones. She just wants to have this life with them. And the moment was shot in kind of this beautiful way that made it seem too good to be true. And of course, we all knew it was. I feel like I felt more tense knowing that there's something going on with Dorothy, but not being sure what, and having her surface behavior be so, smooth as cream. To me, that was almost more unnerving. I like Dorothy when her machinations are more obvious. And when it eventually came out what she was going to do, it made perfect sense because her back is really up against a wall here. And there's no way that she's going to surrender to Leanne. But at the same time, she has no power in the house anymore. The servant has become the master. The transformation is complete. And even Jericho, whether he is actually Dorothy's child or not, it's a little up for debate at this point. I think he probably is the resurrected Jericho. He's come even to view Leanne as Mama, as is demonstrated by the scene where he's in the bath with his mother. And Sean is literally worshiping Leanne, and Julian is having a sexual relationship with her. So really, Dorothy is the only one on the outs here, and she could very easily be supplanted. And I think that's where the main sting in the cliffhanger comes from. It was a jarring moment, a moment that I didn't quite see coming. I mean, I kind of wondered if Leanne would lash out at any of the Turners under any given circumstances, but I kind of came to the conclusion she probably wouldn't because she kept saying that she wouldn't. I would never let anything happen to Jericho. I would never let anything happen to Sean. how can you say I would do anything to Dorothy, Sean? The way that she gets so aggrieved in that scene with him and then immediately turns around and harms Dorothy.
You gotta promise me.
Is that why you're out here? You actually believe that I would hurt Dorothy?
It's kind of humorous. It's the similar level of lack of self-awareness that we view typically with Dorothy, where she'll say one thing and then go and do exactly what she said she wouldn't do. But for Leanne to do this, I think it's definitely a heel turn in the show. Up until this point, you know, she's been reaching out to Dorothy as a mother figure, and when she experiences this rejection from Dorothy this episode, the ultimate, you know, I do not want you in my life, I'm trying to get away from you, and realizes that in addition to that, Dorothy is going to take Jericho, that she allows her, clearly, you know, the termites were set up, they were the Chekhov's gun this episode. There's always a Chekhov's gun element in Servant where they set up some element early in the episode that pays off later. And that was part of the fun rewatching this season, was noticing all the moments where they set something up that came back into play later within even the same episode. A creak on the stairs, the baby gates, just all sorts of things that came back into play. And so this episode we had Chekhov's termites, which ultimately resulted in Dorothy falling off the banister. And I think that we all can agree she'll probably be all right. I don't think that they're going to write Lauren Ambrose off the show. But I do think it's a great way to end the season because it leaves Dorothy ultimately at the lowest point she's ever been, completely without control. And now I think that she's going to probably open next season without any physical capability. She's probably going to be an invalid. And this is an ideal arrangement for Leanne, no doubt, and I think we're probably going to get some Misery-like sequences of Leanne being Dorothy's caretaker. And of course, Sean, how he'll respond to this is hard to say because he is aware of something that Dorothy doesn't seem to be yet, which is that Leanne is causing harm to other people. And Dorothy has kind of rejected that, thinks that Leanne is delusional when she thinks that she has hurt Isabel, but we know, and Sean knows better, and how he'll respond when he realizes that Leanne intentionally allowed this to happen to Dorothy. His response to that's going to be interesting to see, as is Julian's, because I think he's kind of gotten awareness of it as well. Leanne is really the god in the Turners household now, and she has pretty much omniscience and omnipresence. So it's going to be really interesting to see where they take this show, if it's going to be Dorothy fighting back, and if she does fight back after this event, this catastrophic accident, how she's going to do that, because she's really, really been kneecapped here. So otherwise, outside the Turner household, things didn't really wrap up here either, and I found it a little bit less satisfying. Of course, the big twist is that Roscoe has been working for Uncle George. I feel like some of you saw this coming, possibly now that I go back through Reddit forums and see what people had been theorizing, but I didn't see it coming. But it's not really that big a deal because it just, Roscoe was always kind of a mysterious figure, and it never really was clear what he was up to. So, he's working for the bad guys. Got it. Not that big of a revelation. But the fact that, we've got Uncle George reintroduced and the forces of darkness are coalescing outside the Turner household, I think it's pretty clear this show ends when the house collapses and the Turners are forced to move on from the house, and probably from the parasitic influence of Leanne. Whether she dies or whether she finds her own measure of peace remains to be seen. But I don't think there's any way that this show ends with them all in the house and baby Jericho still alive. I just don't see it. I also don't see this being a projection of Dorothy's imagination. Some of you have given great reasons why you think this is the case, but if that's the case, it really feels a little bit too much like it was all a dream twist to me, and I really feel like the writers of Servant are going to give us better than that, for one thing. And I also feel that if that is the case, there's just a lot of elements that just don't really line up correctly in the story. if Leanne is Dorothy's subconscious, is Dorothy trying to hurt herself this episode? I just don't see it. But let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. Let me know why I'm wrong if you still think that this twist is plausible. I haven't decided what I'm going to review yet coming up. So if you're interested in seeing upcoming reviews on this channel, please, give me suggestions. I'll take those into account when I decide what to review next. But I have a few shows in mind that I'm planning to review. Let me know what you thought overall of this season and this episode. I thought this was a great season, rivaling season 1, and I really admire the showrunners for taking it in some dark and twisted directions. I really didn't think they would go this far with Leanne's character. I thought that they would leave her more likable than they have. So those are my thoughts for what they are worth. Let me know what you thought in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching.